Hey everybody, wanted to do a quick commentary on the current state of affairs around Chris Chan now that we are about a month away from Chris appearing in court for what is hopefully the final time. Uh, Before I get into that, I want to do my call to action up front, otherwise, I'll forget to do it. If you don't know already, I have just released a concept album called Nowhere Land, which was inspired by the life story of Chris Chan and tells the story of Chris Chan as a progressive rock opera concept album. So it's gotten a very positive response so far, which I really appreciate. And I encourage anyone who has not heard it yet to check it out, and anyone who has heard it to listen to it again and again and again. Anyway, and it's available on all the major streaming services: Amazon, Apple Music, Spotify, all of that, and all of the minor distribution services and all of the international distribution services and all of that. Someone even asked me why I bothered to apply for distribution in China when it would just get banned. And at first that seemed unlikely, but then I thought about Chris Chan's ongoing contentious relationship with China. Anyway, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the current situation. I commented when Chris went back in the can, and now as we approach these the final days of this current span of incarceration, there's not a whole lot to be gleaned from the letters themselves. They're just becoming increasingly ridiculous, as if they weren't already transcendently ridiculous. But what occurs to me as I've been following them and I've been listening to them being read and everything, so a few things do stand out. One is that Chris is trying different ways of throwing Barbara under the bus. I had commented, and again, I am not a mental health professional, this is just armchair speculation on my part, but I wonder about Chris, and I've commented in the past that there may be some sociopathic tendencies or something, in the sense that he's very quick to throw people under the bus when they're not useful to him anymore. Now, Chris is not bright enough or functional enough to make good on his sociopathic tendencies the way a really competent con man or scam artist would, or something like that. But he does seem to have that tendency where once you have betrayed him, or once you're no longer of use to him, he throws you under the bus, or he discards you. That may also just be the result of him being an incredibly emotionally infantile person and not being able to appreciate people in his life on those grounds. So again, I don't know. But whatever the case, he does seem to be trying to, he seems to remarkably be casting Barbara aside. I talked last time about how he tried this he seems to be trying this gambit of saying that it was Barbara all along and that she was the one that was doing it, or initiating all of this, and that's a new tactic that he's taken. In one of the more recent letters, though, he said that he just said that anything Barbara says doesn't count because she's because of her declining mental state or something like that. Which again, I guess they've just given up on getting Chris to stop saying potentially incriminating things. But if he's saying that could be construed as him knowing that she had diminished capacity and could not give consent and things like that. But as he does this, and as he tries to navigate around it, it seems like there's a very strong potential that maybe some statement has been, some deposition has been taken from Barbara or something like that, or they have somehow turned her around on him. And so, as I try to analyze what happens, there's two things there are two major influences on Chris right now. There's the court and the legal system, which includes his own attorney, and then there's all of the Weens and other assorted lunatics that write stuff to him and try to get control of him, and try to control the narrative even now. And it's entirely possible that people are sending him bullshit, pretending to be Barbara or pretending to be some legal representative or something like that, and that he's cycling all of this in as well. So it's virtually impossible to know directly, based on what he says, what's going on. I do agree that the recent I agree that the recent kind of transition to a mental health facility and back, he describes that as being that was done to help educate him on courtroom procedure and that kind of thing. And courtroom procedure, the behavior you're meant to embody in the courtroom is extremely user friendly. They tell you what you need to do at every step of the process. And so I agree with people who are saying that probably what happened was that he was becoming uncontrollable in the courtroom the last time he was in there, and they just said, look, you need to get him under control before we can proceed any further with this. And probably what my best suspicion about probably what happened in there, people have been saying that he probably lost control when he found out he wasn't going to get to go home yet. That's possible, but probably what was happening was, this is Chris, he has no self-editing mechanism, and probably what happened was at the last court hearing, they had a bunch of professional witnesses, expert witnesses coming in and saying, he's stupid and crazy, he's stupid and crazy, he's stupid and crazy. And Chris, the deity, did not appreciate this, and lost control because of that. You saw what happened, for example, in the we know about the first incident, it was, I don't think it was even the first hearing, it was just the initial process where the judge referred to him as a man, and he interjected that he was actually a woman. And you don't interrupt the judge. You don't argue with the judge like that. That's a fairly basic concept. So I have a feeling, based on just that being enough to provoke a response, I have a feeling what happened was all of these people coming in saying saying negative things about him probably set him off. And that's probably, when they talk about courtroom procedure and appreciating courtroom procedure, it was probably educating him on how to sit still and shut up while all of this went on. And so that's the main thing. And as we approach this, what concerns me in his writing is he is still clinging to the delusion that he can go back to Branchland, and he's still clinging to that delusion that he's going to somehow get back to Branchland. That could mean a few things. One thing it could mean is that the courts and the legal system, including his lawyer, have been using Branchland as a carrot on a stick to get him to cooperate. It could be that the trolls and the Weens are writing him things that are writing him things that are manipulating him and making him think that there's potential he could get back to Branchland. Or, tragically, there is potential that he will return to Branchland. And people will say that will be the beginning of the homeless saga. I don't think so necessarily. I think what will really happen is that trolls will move in with him. People will start moving in with him. They'll take over the mortgage and that kind of thing, but they'll start moving in with him, and he will they'll start moving in with him, and he'll subsist at that level for a while before the house is eventually lost for some reason. So we're probably looking at about a 6-month window of all of that happening. I would estimate before the real homeless saga begins. So that is worrisome. And what I would say, the other thing is, now the other possibility, unfortunately, there are a few other things that may happen. One thing is they may just give him a bus ticket and say, get out of our state, go be a problem in somebody else's state for a while. In which case that'll be even worse, because the homeless saga will begin in a state where he doesn't know anybody or anything, or what to do or anything like that. So he'll really be screwed at that point. But one thing that's really concerns me is who is going to be there when he walks out of that jail. If they don't have a plan in place for him, who's going to be there when he walks out of that jail? And that's when we have to worry about Ethan Ralph picking him up, when we have to worry about Jacob Sockness picking him up, and things like that. That is concerning to me. And about the only proactive idea I can put forward at that point is maybe the Praters can help. And if I understand correctly, the Praters are a group of people benevolent to Chris who were selling his artwork and that sort of thing, or helping him sell his artwork and merchandise and that sort of thing. And we know that he has been in touch with them in prison, because they've published a bunch of artworks, drawings that they've received from him in prison. And so my best guess would be, hopefully, if the Praters are even somewhat benevolent to him, maybe they can arrange to intercede. And if that happens, get a hold of Chris, get a hold of Chris if you want to take him in, get a hold of him, take him in, and hide him from the world. That's the reality at the end of the day. Hide him from the world. And that was the hope that I and a lot of other people had with the hospital thing, was that hopefully he would finally be hidden away from the world, and that would be that. But one of the things that's funny, the Praters, I was looking at the artworks. I hesitate to call them artworks. I say that only in the most technical sense. But the art that the Praters had been sent by him, and one of them is so interesting to me, because very little. I'll put a link to it in the description. Well, I don't know if linking to the quickie will cause YouTube to react badly or not. Somebody tell me if you know. But irrespective of that, you can just go on the quickie and look up prison art if you want to see what I'm talking about, or the Prater prison art, I think is what it's called, to see what I'm talking about. But there are a number of drawings that he has sent out while he's been in jail or in prison. And it's funny, because I've talked in the past about how his art has no real gravitas whatsoever. It's completely dismissible crap. But these few pictures seem to have, finally he's producing something that has some real significance to it, in the sense that there's almost a sense of bittersweetness to it, of melancholy to us. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze. Of bittersweetness, of melancholy, of that kind of thing, and a haunting, almost liminal quality to some of it. It's very strange, and I'm not saying that these are great artistic or intellectual achievements or anything, but it's just, finally there seems to be something, an underlying sense of meaning to what he's doing, rather than just most of the time when you look at Sonichu and that sort of thing, it's very obvious that this is the work of a simpleton who is just regurgitating obvious commonalities in all of the cartoons that he that he looks at, and that sort of thing. But finally, there's like an even on an unintentional level, there's this gravitas and this meaning to these pictures. One of them is an aerial view of the Sonichu Temple of Branchland, and it's kind of haunting because you're looking you're looking at this image knowing that it's endowed with so much meaning for him, and it's this very there's this very stark solemnity to it that's very strangely moving and very sad. I think on an unintentional level, I think it's funny how when we know things about an artist and we know about an artist, it can cause us to appreciate their work in a different way. It's kind of like, I know this is an extreme jump, but it's kind of like if you look at the paintings of Adolf Hitler, most of his paintings are technically competent, but they're not of any real artistic significance. It was things that he was doing to try to, like, submit to art, apply to art schools and that kind of thing. And so if you look at most of his paintings, they're just kind of pastoral images, paintings of buildings and that sort of thing. And there's really not any major artistic statement being made whatsoever. They're just basically technical drawings. But then if you go through it, there's this one painting that he has that's very different from all the others, where it's a very dark image and it looks like a corridor. And maybe you've seen it if you know what I'm referring to, or you can look it up. But it's this dark corridor that just disappears, goes off all the way down to the horizon point, and it's this dark corridor that disappears off in the distance. And and what it does is, it gets darker and darker as it goes, and then in the foreground, kind of halfway into the shadow, there's this man sitting, this kind of decrepit bureaucrat-looking man sitting there at a little table, and he's looking straight at the viewer, and then there's another person kind of lurking in the shadows behind him. And it's such a, there's no explanation for what this is. These are all things that were, recovered from Hitler's possessions after the war and everything. But it's such an oddly unnerving image when you think about the structures of power and the bureaucratic machinations that were enacted by Hitler and the horrors that they produced and that sort of thing. It endows the painting with a darker sense of purpose. It feels like we're staring into the mind of one of the most evil people in history, and it's very unnerving because we know the reality of around the person who created it. And that drawing that Chris does of Branchland is much the same. It has the same weird, stark solemnity to it. But another one of the drawings that's interesting to me is there's one where Sonichu and Rosechu are drawn they're drawn standing in a clearing in a forest. There's some kind of forest clearing that they're standing in, and there's some cabins or something that indicate that this is some kind of new development that's being constructed in the wilderness. And there are all of these other Sonichus and Rosechus walking around, carrying out various tasks, but of course they all look exactly like Sonichu and Rosechu. And as they're standing there looking at it, Sonichu is thinking, "Gosh, just look at everybody," or something like that, or "This place looks great," or something like that. And then Rosechu is thinking, "We have such a diverse group." Something to that effect, but she uses the word diverse to describe all of these characters that are milling about. And it's funny because there's nothing diverse about them. They're all exactly the same. and so much so that, we joke about the utter lack of imagination in the Sonichu universe, that all people of Sonichu's, or all males of Sonichu's species are just called Sonichus, and all females of Sonichu's species are just called Rosechus. So they're all named after the two main characters. And it's so ridiculous. But what's amusing, darkly funny to me about that image, and this is where I talk about suddenly these images seem to be a little bit more emotionally resonant and that sort of thing. Uh, it's so interesting to me because what it feels like is it almost feels like a New Yorker cartoon or something like that, like the dry, solemn wit of it all and everything, the brevity of the image. There's this strange irony to it that feels like that understated the understated humor of the New Yorker or something like that. And it's so interesting to me because Sonichu, Chris in doing this, it's so funny to me because what we see, an ongoing through line in Chris's stuff is a mimicry of important concepts or important societal occurrences and that sort of thing. He knows that these things are supposed to be included and they're supposed to be mimicked and that sort of thing. He's aware of that, but he doesn't understand the actual underlying significance of the things that are being presented. And so the result of that is you have somebody that's very much trying to go through the motions. For example, you have the Rosachus and Sonichu that try to campaign for women's rights by stripping off their clothes. And Chris does not get does not realize the sexist irony or absurdity of what he's doing. He just knows that these are things you're supposed to campaign about, and these are ways that people campaign about these things and that or draw attention to issues and that sort of thing. And so as we go, as we think about that, we bring that back around to this current image where he's talking about how diverse they all are, what a diverse group it is. And it's just that final thing of him presenting the things that he thinks he's supposed to present without knowing what these concepts actually or what meaning they're actually endowed with, what these ideas actually represent or anything like that. And as we move into what will hopefully be the final stage of the Chris Chan saga, looking at that, you can draw this dramatic line or this thematic line from that all the way back to the way his parents taught him to interpret and interact with the world, which was to go through the motions of being a normal person, go through the motions of it all, and hopefully nobody will notice the reality of what you are, rather than engage with the reality of what you are and try to correct it. And so that analysis, that's my analysis of the Prater art as it's been coming out, and his artistic output in general, is it's just this thing of do a surface level recreation of what you think you're supposed to do in the world and try to get by that way. And we see that if you look at even Sonichu issue 0, if you read through it, there's a fake advertisement for a non-existent Sonichu video game that shows up several pages in. And again, it's that concept of, just do what you think, present what you think you're supposed to present to the world, and that will be somehow sufficient. And it's such a strange thing because they didn't, when they were communicating all of these things to him with what little tools they could give him what little tools they had to offer him on how to deal with the world, and what little tools he could actually appreciate and apply in dealing with the world. When they were giving him all of that fakeness, that fake it till you never make it attitude that they gave him, I don't think they realized at the time that they were dealing with someone who had this weird megalomaniacal side that had delusions of grandeur and that sort of thing about how significant of a splash he would actually make in the world and everything. And so I'm kind of thinking aloud here as I say this, but as I've gone into this, one of the major themes that I've discussed in my commentary on Chris Chan has been, how do we prevent future Chris Chans? And I think in recognizing that, that those are crucial pieces of it. People that are just mimicking neurotypical behavior is crucial. I think that combined with this, that combined with these grandiose, Dunning-Kruger effect level, grandiose hopes and dreams of what you're going to accomplish in life. I think when those two things run together, those are critical components in creating someone like Chris Chan. So that's my observation on that. Excuse me, sweetie. There's Mitzi, for those of you who didn't get your fix. And so those are my current observations. I don't know that there will be that much more to say before he gets to court. I'm sure I'll have plenty to say once we know, what's going to happen when all of this is over and everything. I am hoping and praying that they are not just going to toss him out and let him fend for himself. I would hope that the fact that he has a rap sheet a mile long, and their understanding of him as someone who has absolutely no self-control whatsoever, hopefully they realize that he's a danger to society and he cannot be let back out into the world. And hopefully the further appreciation of that reality is an understanding of everything that's been going on the internet, and that, he's got this loyal following of weens and that sort of thing that will never stop. That the only way this ends is if he is put somewhere where he cannot be located and contacted now and forever. So that's where we are. We'll see what happens on the 28th.